We have a very special personality joining with us today. He was an international IAS officer. Also, he worked for the Prime Minister's office as a director, and currently he is working as the Deputy Secretary General with the United Nations. Let me welcome Mr. Kumaresh Misra. Welcome, sir. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for having me on Radio 360. And it's a great privilege and an honor to invite it here and to visit the Habitat schools. And of course, this opportunity to talk to you and share some of my experiences over a long period of time.
Urbanization is a tool, right? And 30 to 35% of India is still poor. On that context, what and all were the challenges that you faced while planning for the urbanization of the country?
No, the urbanization in India is still a challenge. And I must say that the present government is focusing on urbanization. The way I got involved with urbanization was that after OPCW, after 7 years in the Netherlands, I had to move on. And then I got an opportunity to become the Deputy Secretary General of Habitat 3 Conference. Now, it's just interesting that the school that I visited this morning is also called Habitat School. And I went to this UN Habitat conference. And this is a conference that started in 1976. It takes place every 20 years.
Yeah.
So the first Habitat 1 took place in Vancouver. Habitat 2 took place in Istanbul in Turkey. And Habitat 3 took place in Quito, Ecuador. Now, the idea of this Habitat 3 conference, the conference is mandated by the United Nations General Assembly. So, United Nations General Assembly mandated the member states to have a conference on urbanization and look into the future, that how can urbanization should be planned, managed, governed for making cities inclusive, safe, livable, and resilient and sustainable. Now, this is the theme for Sustainable Development Goals number 11. So, the idea here was not a particular country, not a particular place, but have a kind of a general plan that is important, and the features that need to be attended to make life more livable in the urban areas. Because what has changed is that if you look at Latin America, which is South America, or even the developed countries, 80% of the population live in cities, in urban areas. But in most of the developing countries, and even Africa, large number, about 40 to 45 or even 50% are still in rural areas. But there is a movement towards urban areas. So there is a challenge. So the way this thing came forward, and therefore this conference in Quito, Ecuador, on 16th of October 2016, adopted what is called the New Urban Agenda. And that brought in all the state. There were about 30,000 participants, visitors to that conference. There were 167 countries represented over there. And they formulated and adopted this New Urban Agenda, that we are going to move towards adopting this, which will make the cities livable, that will make the environment sustainable, that will make employability, the economy. So all these aspects need to be taken together. And that's how one moves. So one interesting thing which happened, especially with, as you mentioned about India, that in India also there is a movement towards cities. There's much greater movement towards cities. And that is inevitable, because more jobs are coming up in cities, livability is better in cities, the connectivity is better in the cities. So you find that people are moving to the cities. So the present government is working towards it, looking at it in terms of how do you make it better. They also have a special program called the Smart Cities program that they've made in India. But this is something that UN, after this conference, you have UN Habitat. It's an organization, as unit of United Nations, which is based in Nairobi, Kenya. And then they do activities and conferences and others, and involve all the stakeholders from various urban bodies, and promote planned urbanization, planned governance of urban areas. And they also have a conference that they do every 2 years, what is called as World Urban Forum. The last World Urban Forum took place in Katowice, Poland, but 2020 Urban Forum took place in Dubai, in UAE. So, see, the whole push is that you have a plan, you have your priorities, you know what the challenges are, move towards it. And so it's a kind of an aspirational commitment of all the member countries of the United States to improve the life in urban cities. So that's how, and so the plans are there, the priorities are there, one needs to implement them and move towards it. But it is challenging, you know, housing is a big challenge because you have a certain movement of people from rural areas to urban areas. Houses are not there. So most of the cities, instead of being proactive, plan to welcome the migrants, they are being reactive. Once the migrants are there, they have already built their shanties, you already have slums over there, and then you start wanting to clean them up. And that becomes so much harder, so much harder. So it is a challenge, but I think we are moving in the right direction, realizing and taking note of the fact that urbanization is important. So globally, through the UN agencies, through the Sustainability Development Goals, and nationally also, the governments are taking note. Yes, it requires huge resources. Okay. That's a challenge.
Yes, sir.
So that's people are working on. And again, the other challenge in most of these countries in modern day life is waste management. And waste management is how do you manage the plastic wastes? That's another big challenge. So there is a big conference that is already, there is negotiation going on in terms of how to prevent plastic pollution. Now, I'm also a director in the Indian Chemical Council. So most of the large chemicals and petrochemical companies, manufacturers are members of this council. And then you also realize that you just cannot eliminate plastics. You need to better manage plastics. You need to better manage plastic pollution. Okay, it has entered the seas, gets into the food and food chain, etc. It's not that the plastic itself is nasty. It's how we use it that is nasty.
Yeah.
So that is a challenge. So I think a lot of things are happening in terms of urbanization, in terms of environment and others. But we are moving. It's a slow progress. Yes, and in between, actually, the big shock, and actually it did break the continuity, was the COVID epidemic. So almost 2.5 years, it just, you know, stopped everything. So now that SDG has been given 2030 as the goal, perhaps my feeling is it might just need a further delay to achieve the targets that have been set out in the Sustainable Development Goals.
Great, sir. Also, you had worked closely with 3 prime ministers, and it would be very difficult to do the decision-making process also, because after all, they are at that level of government servants. So how difficult was that for you to take the decision-making process?
No, once you go into the PMO, the way the Indian Prime Minister's office is structured, the officers who go there, they're all professionals. They're mostly from the IAS, they're from other services as well. So they're all professionals. So anything that needs the decision of the Prime Minister, whether it's a proposal from a ministry, from a department, which is Prime Ministerial approval, that is objectively assessed by the Prime Minister's office, and the alternative, that the possible decisions that you can make, that is put up to the Prime Minister, and he takes it.
That's it.
So it's a very professional relationship, and I must tell you, one of the Prime Ministers at that time we served with, and I served with, was Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee.
Yeah.
And that was the Prime Ministership that he did only for 13 days. So after 13 days, he couldn't muster the majority, so he was resigning and he was going. But we gave him a small tea party farewell in the Prime Minister's office. And the very interesting kind of observation that he made was that, from outside, as opposition leaders, we used to think that PMO, the Prime Minister's office, is the dirty tricks department of the Prime Minister. But after coming here and looking at the way you analyze the proposals and put up the alternatives, you do it very objectively and you leave it to the Prime Minister to choose whatever is the right option. So that's how one worked in the Prime Minister's office. So it wasn't that difficult. But yet, yes, indeed, the challenge was for the previous Prime Minister, for Narasimha Rao, and that's his tenure that I came in. And I also used to write speeches for him. So then, whatever subject he's going to speak on, then you have to prepare, you have to find out, dig into the details. Well, of course, even Prime Minister Narasimha Rao was a very, very learned person. He used to, God knows whether he knew, they say that he knew 16 languages or 10 languages. But I, of course, only dealt with him in English or Hindi, so I can't vouch for that. But nevertheless, we had to, so it was easy. Another challenge was the third Prime Minister.
Yeah.
Was Mr. Deve Gowda. And during his time, he had to speak from the ramparts of the Red Fort, and he had to speak in Hindi. And he's a politician from Karnataka, very respected politician from Karnataka, and he knows no Hindi. So that was a challenge, and I did make him speak in Hindi from Red Fort. Don't ask me how I did it, but I did it.
Also, I have a very curious question. Like, among these three prime ministers, who was the most tough and strict person?
See, when you're Prime Minister, you're not tough or anything. You really see them doing the job. Of course, you see the different priorities. And none of them, so essentially they were taking the decisions, and our job was to communicate and get things done. So all of them had their individual style. Narasimha Rao had a style in terms of being very particular. His timing was particular. He would not do late nights and others. He had particular time for his lunch because of his health conditions, etc. So he was very particular. And one interesting methodology, he was a student of mathematics. And whenever you offered him something, a solution, he won't say yes or no. He would ask you a counter question. That's the style I noticed of him. It will always be a counter question, as if you're giving me a mathematical proof and I'll give you an exception. You'd tell me that. So it was good fun with him. Vajpayee ji, of course, it was short. And so there wasn't that kind of interaction, but I've quoted you this. And then comes Mr. Deve Gowda. He was a very kind of a person who was from the ground. He was not a high intellectual as Narasimha Rao. He was not an eloquent speaker as Vajpayee, but he had the earthy sense of knowing what is good for the people and others. So in spite of the short tenure, he was also being very, very straightforward and normal. So it was great fun, working with all three. None of them, one never felt scary working with any of them. You were just doing your job. And no, indeed it was. And I must share one more. I also wrote a speech for a former Prime Minister.
Oh, who was that?
That was Rajiv Gandhi.
Is it?
One night, I was called to translate his English speech. He was no longer the Prime Minister. He was just leader of the Congress Party. To write a speech translate a speech for his speech, which was approved by his party, and translated it to Hindi. Now, I was worried that, he's a former Prime Minister, he has all these ex-ministers. I'm sure they can find a Hindi translator and others. But the message I got was that, look, he can hire any translator, but he doesn't want a typical Hindi translator. He wants someone who can write it like a speech and not like a translation of an English version. So one night we sat. I said, during daytime I can't come because I have my office. I'm an IAS officer. How can I go to an ex-politician? One night we sat, 4 of us in one room, Rajiv Gandhi, Narsimha Rao, there was Mr. Fotedar and me, 4 of us. From 10 to 2 o'clock in the night, we sat and prepared his speech.
Oh.
And Narsimha Rao left at around 12 o'clock because he was retiring, going home. But that's man's destiny, you know. Then the assassination took place and Narsimha Rao comes back as the Prime Minister. A little anecdote.
Great, sir. Also, I just want to know, like, there will be many IAS aspirants who will be listening to our show now. So, just to get more knowledge about it, what should be the basic skill or an eligibility that one should look forward for to become an IAS officer?
One is to keep an open mind. Open mind. Gather as much information as possible. See, once you appear for an exam like IAS, it's not mug and reproduce. That you mug up an answer, you by rote, and you hope, you make a prediction whether these questions will come up or not, and then you just reproduce over there. That won't work. So you have to keep an open mind, even from your student days. And that's why I love this idea of lead junior now, that you get into the students, get over them, that whatever there is in the textbook or the classroom is the end of learning, and outside is just fun and games. No. Every moment that you walk around, what you see in the newspaper, the news that you hear, all that has learning. And it just embeds in you somewhere. When you go to for an exam like the Indian IAS or the Civil Services exam, many of that information that you may not have prepared will be somewhere in your mind. So it's an open mind that you have to keep learning, keep gathering information. Second is you have to remember that the exam is it for a limited time period. They are not recruiting scholars. They are recruiting potential IAS officers whom they know that has the capacity to read the question properly, understand the question properly, and respond within that 25-30 minutes that you have. So your knowledge or your, I would say your organization of the answers should be such that is possible in that 25-30 minutes. You know, so quite often you hear there, even a normal, you know, exams, college exams, etc. So say, oh, in my first question, I spent 40 minutes, I wrote everything, and then I couldn't finish my 5th question. Come on, you have a limited number of marks in the first one, you have a limited number of time. So keep your mind open, gather as much of information as possible, and remember they are not looking for scholars. They are looking at practical youngsters who have good knowledge, information of what is happening around, are willing to apply and show to the examiner that they are that they can manage it well and support their candidature. So that's what my advice is.
Great, sir. Also, I just want to know that you have been working for the Government of India for a long time in different segments and industry also. But I just want to make clear, or could you please explain us, what is the relationship between a politician and an IAS officer?
You know, my thing is, the relationship must be a professional relationship. The relationship must be professional and clear. And you should be willing to take a transfer from one job to another. See, anyway, if somebody gets upset with you, somebody gets angry with you, at best, what can he do? He can say, okay, I'll transfer you from one department to another department, or one place to another place. And which is generally within a state only, because the way the IAS is designed, you are actually assigned to a state government. I was assigned to my home state of Bihar. So at best, they could transfer me from one place to another place. So long as you are willing to take that risk, then you can maintain a professional relationship. I maintain my professional relationship. I don't think I got any undue pressure from anybody. And they also assess you. I think that is the other thing, that they also assess you whether you are a straight guy or a complicated guy. If they know that you are a straight guy, if they know you are not going to do something wrong, I don't have to keep my honesty on my shoulders. I have no chip on my shoulders that I'm very honest. But if they know, and I don't have to broadcast it, I don't even have to tell them that you are not honest. Just be professional. If you're professional, there is no pressure. Even in a state like Bihar, people will think I'm saying something which is so unusual. But there, if they know you're straightforward, honest, you will not get pressure. You can do the way you want to do, and your life is going to be easy. You are going to sleep well at night. That was my bottom line. I don't want to do something which will make me awake, keep me awake at night.
Great, sir. Also, during your tenure, did you bring any policy or anything like that did you try to make any changes in the policy or something like that?
Change in policy?
Yeah, during your tenure.
One policy that I did, it's still work in progress right now. When I was Joint Secretary in Department of Chemicals, the then Prime Minister had gone to New York. And of course, there is this big interest to bring investment into India. And of course, infrastructure was not that good and others. And so he met a number of top professionals, expat professionals in New York, who told him that, okay, you can't build the infrastructure all over the country. Why don't you identify a region where you build the infrastructure and you invite foreign direct investment in that particular region? And one of the sectors they identified was chemicals. And I was Joint Secretary in Department of Chemicals. That's where then we got onto a policy, worked on it, and promoted a policy called Petroleum Chemicals and Petrochemicals Investment Regions, PCPIR. So it was accepted by the cabinet. The countries came forward. State of Gujarat has already adopted it. But sometimes I do feel a sense of loss as well, that somebody says, what did you find it most frustrating? I said, look, I formulated this policy. By 2007-8, it was in picture and people were approving it and doing it. And then I left for OPCW. So I couldn't see it through. But nevertheless, that's a major policy, and I think the government is still working on it to make it better, and state governments are working on it. And I'm back at it as director at the Indian Chemical Council, inviting investment and other things in PCPIRs.
Great, sir. Okay, now my last question. Like a person who had worked in various different domains, what was the most valuable lesson that you have learned throughout your career?
Just do your best. Wherever you are, do your best. And not at the bidding of someone else, not because you'll get a lot of acclaim. Just do it because you feel that you are discharging your responsibility to the best of your ability and competence. No ego about it. You don't have to claim, because the best person who can evaluate your performance is not your boss. Your sincerity, your boss cannot go inside you and know about it. That is from you inside. So the lesson that I learned, and I'm happy about it, that made me enjoy all the different types of responsibilities I received. That I did try to do my best. Yes, good things happened. Yes, many accolades I received. But it gave me happiness, joy. And while recalling all that, I'm still feeling happy.
Great, great. It was wonderful having you on our show today, sir. It was my privilege to have sir today with us, and thank you so much for being part of our show.
Thank you very much. I feel honored to have been given this opportunity to come to Ajman and give this interview to you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you
so much.
Radio. Listening is a virtue.